Hi, everyone. Welcome to The Mill. I'm your host, Rachel Ballatori, the founder and CEO of Mill & Co. Very excited to have a brilliant mind joining us for today's podcast, Jesse Lohr. His pronouns are he, him, and his. Jesse, thanks for being here.
Oh, so excited to be here, Rachel. Thank you for the opportunity.
Of course. Let's get to know a little bit about Jesse. He is the founder and owner of Green Wave Electric Vehicles, New Hampshire's first and only dedicated EV dealership on a mission to save the planet with awesome, affordable cars. Jesse completed his bachelor's at New York University and MBA in sustainability at Antioch University. He spent 18 years serving people with disabilities in transportation before deciding to start Green Wave in 2022. Jesse serves on the board of New Hampshire Business for Social Responsibility and the New Hampshire State Coordinating Council for Community Transportation. He lives in Portsmouth, New Hampshire with his wife, two teenage kids, and two dogs. On his rare days off, he'll be kayaking the Piscataqua.
Piscataqua.
Piscataqua. You know what? I'm from New York, Jesse. So things make sense where I'm from, how we pronounce them, not like Haverhill or Peabody or, any of the other weird
Woburn. Woburn.
Woburn, right, exactly. Or he'll be skiing the whites. Isn't it so fun to hear your bio? It's my favorite part to read back to people.
It is.
So
It's a
fun.
little,
And
little
you have
fun.
two dogs. I have three. Three's one too many for the record. Are they close in age?
They're about 2.5 years different. Our second was our pandemic puppy.
Nice.
We have two sheepadoodles, half sheepdog, half poodle mix. We love them. What kind of dogs do you have, Rachel?
Oh, it's a 12-year-old black lab German Shepherd mix, a 6-year-old little like yellow lab mix, and a almost 4-year-old golden retriever. It's one too many. I love them all. I hope they're not listening to this podcast. If you are, it's not enough. But anyways, enough about our dogs. Let's get to know about you. You spent 18 years working in transportation for people with disabilities before you started Green Wave. Tell us about that work.
Yeah, so when I got out of college, I really wanted to make a big impact on my community. I thought working in the nonprofit sector would make sense, and I discovered this developmental disability human services. And I went to work for an organization that served people with autism, Down syndrome, other types of developmental disabilities. And it was really great work because your entire job is to help improve the quality of life of people who come from marginalized backgrounds and who have really difficult upbringings. A lot of them at that time were coming out of, they had grown up in an institution like an asylum, like a state school. And so it was a really great opportunity because it was all focused on making better, more inclusive communities and solving complex problems for people with complex needs. And that was really great work. And I did that for almost 10 years. I worked for Easter Seals for many years and worked for the Sisters of Mercy in Brooklyn, New York. And it was great work. But then, I got a little older, got married, had a couple of kids, and couldn't really meet my financial goals for my family with the salaries that you can pay in social service. And so I made the transition to wheelchair accessible van sales, right? Because I was working, transportation was one of the big issues that we solved for people with disabilities. And then I learned that you could make more in sales by selling the vans that transported people. And so I made that switch in 2012 and worked for a company based out of New Hampshire. It was called Rideaway, and they were acquired a couple of years later by Mobility Works. And they were a little bit bigger, but over the next 5 years, through acquisition and greenfield growth, went from about 20 stores to about 90 stores nationwide. And I was in charge of the commercial sales division. I sold a lot of wheelchair accessible taxis in New York, Boston, Philadelphia, San Francisco. That was fun and wild. And then ran the Florida division for a year, and then was vice president of sales and service for the entire company. Providing wheelchair accessible vans, adaptations for 95 stores in 32 states across the country, and that was really good work for a while. It was fun,
Yeah.
but then and we could chat more about that because that's still some of the work that I do at the State Coordinating Council for Community Transportation, because transportation is not just a problem for people with disabilities, it's a problem for so many people. And in our built environment, if you don't have access to safe, reliable, affordable transportation, then your quality of life is really going to suffer. It's really easy to see for somebody who has Down syndrome and can't drive how lack of access to transportation can impact their life. But we all have people we know who are getting older and maybe shouldn't be driving anymore, but they're terrified of losing that freedom. And they call it social determinant of health, right?
Mhm.
People who don't have access to transportation don't go to the doctor as much, don't get the care they need, and get sicker. From a public health standpoint, transportation is really key. But I've always been interested in sustainability. Uh, Joined New Hampshire Businesses for Social Responsibility back in 2018. I've always been a little concerned about climate change. I mean, I love our winters here in New Hampshire. I'm a skier. I love to skate in the ponds. We can see that start to change in our lifetimes right now. And I decided I needed to go back to get my MBA. It was time, coming out of the pandemic. And so I said, sustainability is kind of this area that is of interest to me. And so I had to go into my MBA program and read all this earth science stuff and read the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and their findings and their reports, and then a lot of scholarly work around what's really happening with our changing climate. And I went from being concerned about climate change to being fairly terrified about what the world is going to look like for my kids and especially my grandkids as this continues. And so around that same time, I bought my first electric vehicle back in 2021. I don't know if you remember the first ads that came out for the Ford Mustang Mach-E.
Mm,
I was always a Mustang guy, but I could never see myself in a sports car,
yeah.
right? But the Mach-E was a crossover SUV, perfect for a family, all-wheel drive, 270 miles of range, and I was struck. My heart fell into my stomach. I broke into a cold sweat. I said, I think I'm in love. Honey, can I buy that? And she's like, we can't afford that. But when we did the math on how much I was driving and how much we were spending on gas, it was
Yeah.
actually not that big of an expense. It was going to cost us a little bit more. But it was worth it ultimately to change the impact that we were having on the world, to make a decision that we could reduce our carbon impact, and save the world a little bit with our money. It gave us agency. So we bought the car, and it changed my life. It really did. Made me fall in love with EVs. Have you ever driven an electric vehicle, Rachel?
No, never. Never once.
Yeah.
Hybrids, yes, but never like a truly electric vehicle.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's maybe I'll make that
It's
I'll make it at a
it's
point too. Now
transformative.
that I'm having kids and need more space and will be probably driving more.
Yeah, it's transformative. It's
Yeah,
fast. The acceleration is fantastic. The design aspects of these cars that they're putting into them are really exciting.
yeah.
It's so quiet, right? Also a big music fan, big audiophile, and when your car's a lot quieter, you can hear the music a lot better.
Mm,
And I traveled all over New England and the Mid Atlantic and never had a problem with charging. It just worked
yeah,
out for me, and
yeah.
it just kind of changed everything. And so, funny story actually. As part of my master's, I said, "This is we could do this." I was at this company that did wheelchair accessible vans, and I said we could do a spin-off, right? Like we already have dealerships set up in 32 states. We already have lines of credit. We have technicians. We have the organizational capability. So I presented this to my boss, who was the president and chief operating officer, and he was like, that's an interesting idea. Why don't you put together a working group and, flesh it out a little bit? So me and 9 executives worked for 6 months to put together this plan where we would spin off this used EV dealership, and everybody was like really excited about it. We were like, yeah, we can make this work. It's going in this direction. And so we put together this package and we presented it to the executive committee, the C-suite. And they looked at it and they were like, this is very interesting. No, we're a wheelchair van company. And so I said, this is just too good. This is too good to not do. So left my job, my high paying job. I cashed in my 401k, called up my dad, and who was retired, and I said, hey, do you want to throw some cash into this and start this business with me? I've got the business plan already, right? And he said yes. And so we found this beautiful empty Chevy dealership, former Chevy dealership here on the Seacoast on Route 1 in Northampton, and made an offer on a lease, got it, applied for some loans, got them, got our dealer license, and here we are. Here we are, 2.5 years, going on 3 years later. November 7th, 2022 is when we incorporated. February 5th, 2023 is when we opened our doors, and so yeah, we're doing great.
That's an incredible story, and I think that a big takeaway of that, Jesse, that I speak with a lot of entrepreneurs and folks that have dreams of starting a company. It is so hard to take that first step when the feedback you receive is kind of negative, even though it's a good idea. And I think we allow a lot of the negativity and the doubt to creep in, and then we start to doubt ourselves versus saying, no, you know what, I've really thought this through, and I'm sure there are things I haven't considered that I'm going to face, and I will have roadblocks and bottlenecks and things will happen, but I know that at the core, this is a good idea and I believe enough in myself. Talk to me about pushing through that, because that is challenging to then say, you know what, screw you, I'm going to quit and go do this myself.
Right. I think one of the things that is interesting about my story is that I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. I never wanted to own my own business because my dad started his own business growing up, and it was really hard. And I've known people who are entrepreneurs, and I knew it was really hard. And I had a good job, I had a good gig, right? It was hard work too, but I had people to help with accounting and human resources and all that stuff. And I could focus on the things that I really loved to do. And I knew as an entrepreneur, you have to be able to do everything, at least to start. And, but what happened was, kind of fate, right? Like my values, my passions, really came together and led me down a path that made me really believe that this was something that the world needed, and that I had the skills to do it, and that I needed to, for my family and for my life, right, to say, like, what did I do with my life? What did I do with my life? Did I work for a company that did good things and made good money and all that, or did I really do what I was called to do and try to address what I believe is the biggest threat to humanity, with something that actually kind of sounded fun and cool? I mean, like electric cars, like cool, right? I mean, the climate crisis is multifaceted, and there are a lot of things that we need to do to address it. But like solar panels, they're not fun. They're awesome. They're great. They're
drive it.
They're key to our future, but like they don't go 0 to 60. Yeah, you can't drive it. They don't go 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds. So, and I know how to sell cars, and so it was taking a deep breath. It was having the support of my wife and partner in all things, and my dad, who's been a great support and great person throughout the years, saying that, yeah, you got to do this. And so here we are.
Yeah, you took the jump. Again, that jump is so hard. I recall starting my own business, and I was leaving a very, very high paying job living in Manhattan with a lot of expenses to make $0 a month on a wing and a prayer. Like it is not easy to do that. And I had so many people tell me, oof, I mean, but you don't have an MBA. How are you going to start a business when you've never really taken a business course? And we've got a lot of expenses. When you just, isn't it just easier to stay where you have health insurance and do all these things? And the answer is probably yes to most of those things. Sure, yeah, that could be, that is an option, but it's not the option I want. And so it really takes it takes a lot of guts and a lot of support from people that do believe in you, and then kind of silencing the people that don't. Maybe taking into account some of the things that they're saying of like, have I really thought about that? How am I going to combat that if I face it? Oh, great, I've already thought about it. Perfect. Move along.
Yep, absolutely, 100%, 100%. I mean, it's like it comes back to parenting, right? Everybody tells you how hard it's going to be to have a new kid, and you can't possibly know, but you know that that's what you want for your life, and then you experience it, and it's crazier and harder and more challenging on your soul than anything you've ever experienced, but it's also more rewarding than anything you ever could have expected, right? It's amazing. So,
Yeah.
and actually, having a business is kind of like having a baby. Having a new business is like having a baby, and I'm very lucky to have my wife, who, was the primary caregiver, for our kids when they were young. I was always around, but it was like she was the main one. She recognizes, she's like, you've got the baby now, Jesse. Right? You've got the baby that needs all of that attention and all of that love and all of that,
Right.
absolutely.
Yeah. So Greenwave, it's New Hampshire's first and only dedicated EV dealership. What were hurdles that you faced? I mean, how did you overcome that? How did you get to that place? Or did you find that it was actually fairly easy once you had the momentum to open it up and get people's attention and buy-in into this concept?
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, based on the research that I did, based on knowing kind of where the market was going, what the manufacturers were building for these cars, like the idea that there would be electric vehicle supply, was pretty solid. So I knew that. I knew I could get them, and I had the skills and the ability to do that. Um, but there were, especially in our first year, some real major challenges to being profitable and getting it off the ground. One of the biggest challenges in the car business is just price stability, right? And we all know that cars depreciate, right? But you probably don't think about the fact that when a car is on a dealer's lot, it's depreciating too, right? And how fast that depreciates depends a lot on the market conditions. So in our first year, like, we didn't know which cars would sell the best, right? We didn't know which models we were going to be able to get. We didn't know the best sources to acquire those cars, like all of that. So our vehicle strategy was something we really had to build from the ground up, because nobody was out there. There wasn't a model for this, right? So like, what are you going to stock? How many are you going to stock? How many are you going to sell, right? Because we're also have a line of credit to pay for all of that, and the lines of credit are not cheap. Those are double-digit APRs. And so we bought a bunch of cars, but then in our first year, 2023, there was a price war as manufacturing caught up with the demands, right? Because if you have been following Tesla at all, you knew that in 2021, 2022, you had to wait like 6 months to get a Tesla, right? So they were selling for more than sticker price, which, 50 grand, they would be selling for 60, $70,000, which was great. Luckily, we missed that bubble, though. We came in right after that bubble because Tesla dropped their prices by 15% right at the beginning of 2023. And
Mm.
then they dropped them again at the end of 2023. And there was this kind of cascading effect, because when they dropped their prices, Hertz, the car rental company who had 100,000 of these in stock, now they were upside down in these cars, so they had to defleet those. And then Ford dropped their prices and Nissan dropped their prices. So I'm sitting here, we're trying to get customers out to buy the cars on my lot. I've got 30, 35 cars on my lot, and we're losing, $10,000 a month in asset value, right? It was just nuts. And so what do? You cut the price, you lose money, you move on, right? You try to buy it less expensive. I mean, I can remember I just bought 3 Teslas from Hertz. And then a week later, they're selling the same 3 Teslas, same make, model, mile, year, all that for $2,000 less. And I'm like, oh my God. And that's what our margin is in the car business. People think, oh, you sell a car for $30,000, you make $28,000 profit. No. It's the opposite, right? So like when asset values fall 15%, we go from being in an equity position on that to a loss position on that. And I can imagine that for many entrepreneurs, like, what's the right inventory level? How do you minimize inventory spoilage? How do you stay in line with market prices? And it was savage in that first year. We basically lost almost our entire cash investment in that first year. We were down to our last couple, payrolls that we could make, and then it kind of turned around. So you asked about the biggest barrier. I think the barrier was understanding the market and getting a volume of purchasers that we could sell quickly enough to not be losing that. And really, at the end of the day, what solved that issue, we spent a ton of money on marketing and advertising. We spent a ton of money on Facebook ads. We'd spent a ton, that was our solution in the first year. But what saved us was focusing on creating an excellent client experience, an exceptional client experience, really taking care to make sure that the people who came, everybody who walked in the door, even if they didn't buy a car, were like, wow, that's a really cool place. That was really fun, even though they didn't have exactly what I was looking for, or for the people who did buy from us, saying that was the best car buying experience I've ever had. That is what saved us. But because I was really focusing on, and I taught people who were also selling cars to really focus on the number one most important thing is that people learn more about their own personal transportation and understand the benefits that they would get by going EV, and that they have fun driving one of these cars, right? And so that, that somebody would come back for their second car, or my friend bought from you, or my mom bought from you. And that's what really started to coalesce beginning of 2024. And the snowball started to roll, and we made it back.
I'm glad you did. We talk to clients a lot about, because it's especially early businesses, they're like, I need to be everywhere all the time saying all the things, and you don't. And the way that we talk about it is you should lean really hard into the things you own. You own your space, you own your client experience, you own your email list and the content you send out. What you don't own are things like meta, because you're responding to an algorithm that's a pay to play. You don't own that space. You can participate in that space, right? But you're competing. And so it sounds like you kind of did that. You leaned hard into the things that you own. You own over the whole experience from start to finish. And especially when it comes to car buying, certainly people do a lot of their own research, right? Like, we're going to look up safety measures and recalls and speed and reliability, gas, whatever, all the things. But I have always bought Toyota. Why? Because my parents have always bought Toyota, and it was just ingrained in me. And that's just what I look for. I'm not looking at other vehicles because I feel safe and comfortable in this brand that has just been steeped into me my whole life, that this is safe, reliable, longevity, good mileage, reliable car. But that's my referral is from my parents. My word of mouth comes from my parents. The trust comes from them, family. So if you're right, if you can create a wonderful experience, you're not the only EV dealer in the world, right? They could go get a Tesla if they wanted, but they're going to come to you. Why? Because they had a great experience. They felt taken care of. They felt seen. They felt educated. It's such an overlooked piece of business right now, especially when it comes to people talking to us about how do I market myself, and it's like, well, it starts what you do inside your four walls.
Yeah, no, you're so right. And one of the biggest things that came through the interactions with our clients, I've never been super aligned with a car brand, because I've always, for the last several years, or selling it. When you're selling it, right, you can't be a Toyota only person if you have Dodges and Hondas on your lot as
Yeah.
well, right? Like, so, but it was really interesting to me to recognize that people really do have ingrained brand preferences, especially for their cars. And those things may or may not be true anymore or whatever, but they still stick, right? So what we set about to do, we knew we were already a bit of a blue ocean strategy in the sense that nobody was just doing EVs, right? At least when we got started. That's changed a little bit, but so we knew we were kind of going into our own space, but it was a tiny patch of blue ocean and a large red ocean of the general auto dealership world.
Yeah.
So what we set out to do, I recognize that when you're making a switch to a different category of vehicle, right, from an ICE via internal combustion engine car to an EV, it's an opportunity to re-examine those brand preferences and say, what is it that I like about Toyota? You like reliability about a Toyota, right? So we extract those things, we understand what connects them to the brand, and then we explain how other brands of EVs, like EVs are generally more reliable than internal combustion engine cars because they have fewer things to break. Right? So by creating that kind of, I refer to it sometimes as a liminal space, right? They come into Greenwave and we create an experience that allows them to put up their preconceptions, desires, needs, budget, whatever, and then we, in a very kind of gentle and educational and consultative way, put those back together in like, okay, so actually, based on what you're telling me, a Hyundai or a Ford would work for you, right? And in that sense, our goal, and we've gotten here, is that when people come to Greenwave, they don't buy a Toyota or a Honda or a Ford. They're buying a Greenwave EV, right? And that's really the goal. If you can create an experience that is it's not, and we're a retailer too, and not everybody's a retailer, right? But if you can create an experience where you are creating the category of what they're buying, it leads to much more word of mouth, higher net promoter score, et cetera, because you're now defining the category. You're not operating within somebody else's category, which is hard to do.
Yeah.
But
It
I
is.
think when you can do that and believe in it long enough, and it is your own belief too, right? It's your own belief that this actually, like, that because you help other people believe it by sharing that with them, that you can get there. It's hard, but that's the way to go if you
I
can.
totally agree. For anyone who's watching that's an aspiring business owner, what's one myth about entrepreneurship that you'd love to bust for them?
Oh man, well, one myth about entrepreneurship that I'd like to bust is this idea that you you can do it all through force of will, right? Is that if you just work every hour, every day, doing everything, just pound it until it's done, right? Move forward by working at it, by putting your shoulder to the grindstone. Um, I've found that, yeah, oh yeah, it's a lot of work, it's a lot of hours, but you can't overcome everything by just working. I mean, I have forced myself to take naps on slow days in the dealership, right? I have, had to spend time, like, stop making phone calls, stop following up with people, stop worrying about this, just sit and chill and meditate. And, this is maybe one slow day or one slow week, but, just have faith, keep doing the right things. I think having faith in your vision is more important than having faith in your work, because the truth is, a lot of this it's out of our hands. We live in a complex economy, um, the ups and downs, the external factors that are going to sway what happens in a given financial period are out of your control. And that was one of the biggest questions that I was asking myself and my partner in the end of 2023, when we had lost so much money, almost all of it. And I said, I know that the business model is good. I know that what we're doing is good. I know that we can succeed. My question is, are the macroeconomic factors too strong for a business this small to survive in at this time? Because it's an emerging market. As such, a lot of volatility in prices, as I talked about, right? And like, we had some good capital going in, but I just didn't know if, maybe the winds and waves were going to be too much for our small little boat, right? And so what do? Well, you batten down the hatches, you tie yourself to the mast, and you sing a sea shanty to the sky and hope that you make it to dawn, right?
Yeah, get your patch out. And so, to that point, Jesse, how do you decide when to trust your gut versus relying on data, industry data, sales data, whatever is out there that's a bit more quantitative versus qualitative?
Yeah. Um, well, the key is quieting the mind to listen to the gut, right? Listen to the gut, because to me, what I do is I'm constantly looking at market data and our pricing and our sales data and looking at all of this stuff. But then I have to shut up for a while, and I have to think about what is my gut telling me, and I have to listen to other people too, even if I think they're wrong, right? So it's hard data. It's reading a lot. It's talking to other people within and outside the business. It's having a really good network. But I think at the end of the day, you always got to go with your gut, unless in, unless the unless the data and the people around you are unanimous in saying your gut is wrong.
Please don't.
But the key is too, I think, humility and knowing when to say you're wrong and making a point because if you're never wrong, you're not reaching hard enough.
Right.
And if you're never, or you're either not reaching hard enough, or you're not listening well enough to the
Right.
people around you. So make it a point as an entrepreneur to find yourself in situations where you're wrong and you admitted that you were wrong at least once a month.
Yeah, I could not agree with that more. And I remember when I was about to start my business, I literally looked at myself in the mirror and said out loud, "What's the worst possible thing that could happen?" And I walked myself through all the scenarios of what if it fails? What if I'm wrong to do this, to start
Mm-hmm.
this agency? What if this model of having a collective of contractors doesn't work? And there's a reason that no other companies exist like this. They're all traditional agencies. And I literally had to say to myself, I will not be homeless. I would move in with my mother and I will figure it out and get another job. And once I kind of came to peace with my worst case scenario, it gave me the freedom to jump because I knew that no matter what, regardless of how far I'm falling, I'm gonna land somewhere where like, okay, well, I'm great. I'm glad I tried, you know? And
Yeah.
so when I look at risk and assess risk and listening to my gut, I'm doing the same thing, right? I'm doing the research. I'm looking at what are others doing, what makes sense for us based on our structure. But then there's a point that it's just kind of a gray area and you just push through and you leap
Right.
and close your eyes. You're like, did I make it? And that to me, that was really helpful was to kind of assess, okay, let's say it fails. Let's say I'm wrong.
Totally.
What does
Mm-hmm.
that mean? What does that look like?
Mm-hmm. Well, and yeah, and then that actually that approach, right, can be really helpful in catalyzing the next steps that you need to do in the business. So I want to take you back to March of 2024, right? This is when we were at that point where literally we were running out of cash. We had, 30 grand left in the bank. We had bills coming due. We had a payroll coming back, and I had four Mustang Mach-E's that I had bought in November they had aged off my line of credit, so I owned them for cash. I had paid around 30 for them. They should have sold for around 32, 33, when we first bought them, but nobody had bought them. And it doubly broke my heart because I loved these cars so much. The Mustang Mach-E, it's the best one. Why is nobody buying these, right? And so, and I can remember I was in a bad mood. My wife remembers that time too, every day, because I was thinking every day, like, am I going to have to go back to working for somebody, selling gas cars, traveling 50% of the time, doing the same amount of work to make the money that I need to make, but it not being mine. And, and I've already lost, like my 401k is already gone, right? So it's like I'm starting really from nothing at a job with no prospects. And I was not happy. And so I was meditating a lot, I was exercising, I was taking walks, I was working. And I realized I just needed to dump those Mustang Mach-E's and, lose 5-6 grand a copy and, sell them, put them at such a low price that they were obviously going to sell, right? Because they were thousands of dollars less than any, so people came from all around for them. And that got 100 grand of cash back into the business. And magically the next month, April, was our first profitable month ever. We sold 37 cars. We actually made some money, and we were cooking. And May was on track for a good month too. And we ended up finishing 2024 okay. But it was that soul searching that you're talking about that said, okay, and made me answer that question. Like, do I want to just exit? What does that look like? No. I don't want to. So what do I have to do to make it another week, another month? And if your aim is true, then it'll guide you to what you need to do to keep going.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So to bring it home, to wrap this up, what advice would you give to young entrepreneurs who are thinking about creating a purpose-driven business in sustainability?
I'd say first to them, before I give any advice, I would say thank you. The world needs you. The world needs your effort, and you're gonna work really hard for this, and it's not gonna be easy, but the world will be a better place for what you are about to do. So that's number one, is thank you. And number two, I'd say really spend a lot of time listening to and learning from other people who have done this in the space. So you're already doing this right now, because it's those pieces of guidance that and those voices that are supportive, that are going to help you get there. I was part of New Hampshire Businesses for Social Responsibility that was full of people in the sustainability space that supported us and also became our customers. I also joined a local networking and referral group to meet other small business owners, to hear other people complain about how scared they were and how hard it was, right? So it's a little support group. I read online about other people doing the same thing in other parts of the country, and now they've become my friends. So build a network, connect, and finally leave some time to quiet your mind, quiet your heart, and find what your spirit is giving you and what it's leading you to, and listen to that, because if you're trying to do something good for humanity, it won't steer you wrong.
Yeah, love that. Well, Jesse, I'm so thrilled that you came on. I love hearing stories like this. It's just perseverance, drive, mission-driven things. It's everything that we stand for, we believe in, clients we love to chat with, and I know that our listeners really love hearing things like this. So thank you. For anyone that is tuned in, regardless of where you're tuning in from, if you'd like to learn more about Jesse or Greenwave Electric Vehicles, we will be tagging them all over all of the things. Please reach out. If you've never driven an electric vehicle, myself included, I strongly encourage you to head out and check out their facility and give a car a test drive. Thank you so much, Jesse. This has been so inspiring chatting with you today.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Thank you for all you do for your leadership. And, best of luck to you. Hope to see you soon.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll see you next time.